You are standing in a spiritual dimension that is uncommon and rare. This is not a place that everyone is called to, and even among those who sense the invitation, only a small number are willing to remain once they realize what it truly requires. It is not that others are untalented, unqualified, or incapable. It is that this level demands endurance when things feel long, surrender when control feels safer, and spiritual resilience when the flesh wants relief. Many admire this height, but few are willing to cultivate the strength necessary to stay here. The position you now occupy is elevated in the spirit, yet it does not feel easy. It carries authority, yet it lacks applause. It is quiet, but not the quiet of comfort. It is the quiet of consecration. It is powerful, but it does not look glamorous. This space is not crowded because it confronts the ego and disciplines the flesh. It removes the craving for recognition and strips away dependence on familiar surroundings. Here, you cannot rely on what used to sustain you. You are required to grow beyond what you once believed was sufficient. You are standing at a point where comfort has been exchanged for responsibility. You can no longer pretend you do not see what God has revealed to you. Revelation brings accountability. Awareness replaces ignorance. Discipline replaces delay. At this level, there are no shortcuts, no quick fixes, no shallow affirmations to keep you moving. Everything requires depth. Depth of character, depth of prayer, depth of alignment. Patience becomes your companion, and obedience becomes your language. This is not a punishment, even if it feels heavy. It is not rejection, even if it feels isolating. It is divine placement. God does not position a soul in such a narrow and demanding space by accident. This realm is reserved for those who have been shaped in hidden seasons, refined through silent battles, and strengthened through personal surrender. The weight you feel is not designed to break you. It is evidence that you are carrying purpose. Greater responsibility accompanies greater calling. When purpose increases, so does the weight of stewardship. Very few survive comfortably here because this level demands maturity. It requires measured responses instead of emotional reactions. It calls you to stand steady while others retreat. It trains you to trust God even when there are no visible signs, no guarantees, and no immediate reassurance. Your faith is stretched beyond feelings and anchored in conviction. Emotions may fluctuate, but obedience must remain constant. In this place, you cannot rely on how you feel. You must rely on who God is. If your spirit senses the seriousness of this moment, it is because something within you recognizes that this is a defining season. This is not ordinary growth, it is transformational refinement. To declare your readiness in this hour is to say, I refuse to withdraw simply because the road is narrow. I refuse to step down because the weight feels intense. I choose to remain planted. I choose to trust God even when comfort is no longer part of the journey. You are standing where few survive comfortably. That is the emphasis. Many may arrive, but few remain. Many may begin, but few endure. The reason you are still standing is not luck and not coincidence. It is because you were built, prepared, and strengthened for this dimension. You were not designed to escape pressure, but to be refined by it. You were not called to shrink in difficulty, but to mature through it. Remain steady. The same God who elevated you to this place will sustain you within it. He will provide strength for the responsibility, clarity for the uncertainty, and endurance for the journey. This level may be narrow, demanding, and uncomfortable, but it is purposeful, and you are still standing because you were meant to. You are standing where few survive comfortably, and this is not a location anyone arrives at by accident. This is not a random elevation or a fortunate coincidence. It is a deliberate placement. The ground beneath you is intentional, demanding, and uncompromising. It cannot be entered casually, and it certainly cannot be sustained by shallow effort. This level responds only to depth. It requires spiritual awareness, disciplined thinking, and consistent alignment. There is no drifting here. Autopilot will not sustain you. Every movement must be intentional, and every decision carries spiritual weight. This space refuses half-hearted commitment. Divided focus becomes immediately visible. Surface-level faith cannot survive here because it lacks roots. When pressure increases, anything without depth collapses. Emotional impulsiveness is exposed quickly in this realm because reactions produce consequences. You are required to practice self-governance, to lead yourself when no one is watching, to correct yourself when no one confronts you, and to encourage yourself when no one applauds you. There is no constant reassurance here. No one is obligated to remind you of your identity. You must know who you are without external validation. At this elevation, faith is no longer theoretical or conversational. It is no longer something expressed only during favorable seasons. Faith here is demonstrated through restraint when you could react, through patience when you could rush, and through obedience when comfort is unavailable. You are required to stand firm when clarity is incomplete and outcomes are delayed. You move forward even when the full picture has not yet unfolded. That alone explains why many people do not remain in this position for long. Many desire the outcome, but resist the process that produces it. They seek elevation, but avoid refinement. They want access to greater things without accepting accountability for greater responsibility. They ask God for clarity, yet hesitate to surrender control. They desire authority, but resist stewardship. This level exposes those contradictions immediately. It filters out those who are motivated by convenience rather than calling. Very few remain, not because God withholds the invitation, but because the desire for comfort quietly disqualifies those unwilling to mature. There are no shortcuts here. Maturity cannot be imitated. Performance cannot replace character. You cannot disguise immaturity with activity, noise, or constant busyness. Distraction does not survive under this kind of pressure. Only depth sustains you. This level requires discipline, while others chase distraction. It requires patience while others rush ahead. It requires emotional restraint while others react impulsively. It requires humility when others demand recognition. Casual effort collapses because the weight of responsibility exposes what is genuine and what is merely appearance. Chosen one, you remain here because you endured what others avoided. You stayed when seasons became uncomfortable and uncertain. You chose to confront truth instead of numbing yourself to escape growth. While others silenced conviction with noise, you allowed yourself to hear it. You embraced awareness instead of running from it. You pursued depth rather than distraction. You chose obedience over ease. Pressure shaped you instead of crushing you. Delay refined you instead of breaking you. You learned to stand without leaning on approval. You learned to move without requiring constant reassurance. You learned to remain steady without applause. That internal training is what sustains you now. It is what allows you to survive in a place where few remain comfortably. This position is not comfortable, but it is powerful. It is not crowded, but it is purposeful. It is not loud, but it carries weight and authority. The quietness here is not emptiness, it is focus. The isolation is not rejection, it is refinement. And the fact that you are still standing is undeniable evidence that you were never designed for a casual existence. You are standing where few survive comfortably, and you are still here because you were built to endure, to mature, and to remain. And because you have remained, the rules that once guided you can no longer lead you the same way. At this level, comfort is no longer a reliable compass. What feels easy, familiar, or emotionally soothing cannot automatically be trusted to direct your steps. What once felt safe can now quietly keep you circling the same ground. What feels calming can disguise stagnation as security. That is why God has been retraining the way you move, the way you decide, and the way you respond. You are being taught to walk by discernment instead of desire. You are learning to move by obedience rather than impulse. You are being aligned by purpose instead of convenience. There was a previous season when comfort was necessary. It helped you recover from wounds. It gave you stability while you were rebuilding. It allowed you to breathe when life felt overwhelming and uncertain. In that time, comfort was a gift. It was restorative. It was protective. But that season has shifted. Comfort was meant to restore you, not to define you. What once helped you survive can now limit your growth if you cling to it beyond its assignment. The very thing that stabilizes you can become the thing that restricts you. That is why your appetite has changed. What once brought relief now feels empty. What once calmed you now leaves you restless. Patterns that once felt safe now feel confining. This is not a loss. It is not rebellion. It is not ingratitude. It is recalibration. God is adjusting your internal compass so you can carry greater responsibility without being ruled by fluctuating emotions. You are being trained to recognize the difference between pleasure and peace. Pleasure offers temporary soothing, but it fades quickly when pressure returns. Peace, however, remains steady even when circumstances are uncertain. Peace does not depend on comfort. It depends on alignment. You are also learning the difference between ease and alignment. Ease avoids resistance and seeks the path with the least tension. Alignment, on the other hand, may involve stretching, discipline, and temporary discomfort, but it strengthens you in the process. Ease preserves energy. Alignment increases capacity. God is teaching you to choose what builds you, not simply what feels good in the moment. You may have noticed that returning to old habits now feels uncomfortable. Environments that once felt welcoming may now feel heavy. Coping mechanisms that once worked no longer provide the same relief. That discomfort is not confusion. It is discernment activating. Your spirit is recognizing that you cannot function at this level with old patterns. Familiarity is no longer confirmation. Just because something is known does not mean it is assigned to your future. At this elevation, emotional ease cannot be trusted as guidance. Comfort can quietly delay obedience. It can persuade you to settle for less than what God is expanding you into. It can whisper that staying where you are is wiser than stretching forward. But stretching is necessary here. Stretch increases endurance. Stretch develops spiritual strength. Stretch expands your ability to carry weight without collapsing. Comfort belongs to the past because it is built on what you already understand. This level requires movement into what you have not yet mastered. You are being trained to walk forward without leaning on what feels familiar. That is why this space is narrow. That is why it is demanding. And that is why few survive comfortably here. You are no longer guided by what feels soothing. You are guided by what aligns. And the fact that you are still standing, even while being stretched, is evidence that you were prepared for this dimension. Purpose is now stretching you into areas you have not yet mastered. Purpose never leaves you where you are familiar. It always leads you beyond what you already understand. And stretch by its nature feels unstable before it feels secure. It feels awkward before it feels natural. It feels uncomfortable before it feels strong. Every new level requires adjustment. Expansion is not automatic. It demands adaptation. As you grow, you must develop new rhythms, establish new boundaries, and cultivate deeper ways of trusting God. What worked in a previous season cannot always function at this elevation. The capacity required here is different. The awareness required here is sharper. This is why your walk feels unfamiliar now. You are not moving the way you used to move. You no longer make decisions based on emotional relief or temporary comfort. Instead of rushing, you pause. Instead of reacting, you discern. Instead of moving out of anxiety, you wait for clarity. You have learned to choose obedience even when obedience costs you comfort. That restraint is not weakness, it is maturity. It is visible evidence that you have grown. Release comfort without guilt. It fulfilled its purpose in a previous season. It stabilized you when you needed restoration, but it cannot guide you at this level. Holding on to it now would slow the very expansion you prayed for. Trust the recalibration happening within you. Trust the internal adjustments that feel unsettling today, but will become stable tomorrow. God is not removing comfort to harm you. He is replacing it with alignment, and alignment will sustain you far longer than comfort ever could where you are standing now. The level you occupy is often quiet, not empty, quiet. The silence is intentional. You are not abandoned. God has deliberately reduced the noise around you. Distractions have been stripped away. Excess voices have been removed. What you are feeling is not absence, it is precision. The environment has been simplified so your focus can sharpen. Few survive comfortably here because isolation reveals truth, and truth is uncomfortable for those who avoid self-examination. When distractions disappear, there is nothing left to hide behind. Constant activity, entertainment, and validation once acted as buffers. Without them, you must confront your thoughts honestly. You must examine your motives. You must acknowledge your fears. You must evaluate your faith. Many retreat at this point. They prefer busyness over awareness. They would rather drown conviction in noise than sit still long enough to hear it. But awareness is required at this elevation. Growth cannot continue without clarity. In this quiet space, identity becomes clear. You begin to discover who you truly are without applause, without comparison, without external approval. You learn what drives you when no one is affirming you. You discover whether your obedience is unconditional or dependent on reward. Isolation removes the mask. It reveals whether your faith is performative or authentic. This is why so few remain comfortably, because here, alignment matters more than appearance. Depth matters more than noise. Character matters more than reputation. And yet, you are still standing. You are standing where few survive comfortably, in the stretch, in the recalibration, in the quiet refinement. And the very fact that you have not retreated is proof that you were prepared for this level of clarity, maturity, and alignment. Because you have remained in this refined and quiet space, even companionship must now become selective, not out of pride, but out of necessity. At this level, access cannot be casual. Conversations cannot be careless. Idle talk weakens focus, and unnecessary voices can dilute discernment. The territory you occupy carries weight, and not everyone is equipped to handle the responsibility that comes with standing here. God guards this space intentionally. Too many opinions would distort your perception. Too much noise would confuse your direction. When influence begins to multiply, protection must increase. You may have noticed your circle becoming smaller, quieter, and more intentional. This is not loss, it is preservation. Not everyone who desires access is assigned to walk beside you in this season. Some people were meant for earlier chapters, not this elevation. Others may misunderstand your solitude. They may interpret your distance as withdrawal or assume you have changed in a negative way. But what they call isolation is actually refinement. Loneliness drains strength and creates emptiness. Refinement, however, strengthens character and sharpens clarity. In this quieter space, God is teaching you to stand without leaning on applause, approval, or constant affirmation. You are learning to validate your obedience internally rather than depending on external praise. You are being trained to trust God's voice above human feedback, to move when He instructs you, even if no one notices, to obey without celebration, to remain consistent without recognition. That kind of strength cannot be formed in crowded environments. It is developed in spaces where your motives are purified and your dependence shifts fully toward God. Isolation sharpens discernment. When noise decreases, clarity increases. You begin to recognize which voices carry truth and which carry distraction. You grow more sensitive to divine instruction because your spirit is no longer competing with constant input. The silence becomes strategic. It is not empty, it is focused. This space is not permanent, but it is necessary. God isolates before He positions. He refines before He reveals. He strengthens before He sends. Few survive comfortably here because comfort thrives in company, but calling thrives in clarity. Many prefer the reassurance of crowds, but calling requires confidence rooted in God alone. Do not rush out of this season simply because it feels quiet. Do not mistake stillness for lack or absence. This territory is shaping you for greater influence, deeper responsibility, and lasting impact. The fact that you are still standing here without retreating to comfort is proof that you were built to endure what many avoid. Chosen one, where you stand, carries weight that others intentionally avoid. This ground is not light. It carries responsibility, heightened awareness, and increased accountability. That is why you feel pressure others cannot understand. You are not imagining it, and you are not weak for feeling it. Pressure is not a sign of fragility, it is evidence of capacity. Weight is felt most deeply by those strong enough to carry it. At this level, ignorance is no longer available to you. You cannot unsee what you now perceive. You see deeper than surface appearances. You discern beneath words and beyond actions. You sense motives. You recognize patterns. Awareness has increased, and with awareness comes responsibility. This heightened awareness alters the way you move through life. You cannot ignore what God has trained you to detect. You cannot pretend not to see what your spirit clearly perceives. Your sensitivity has increased, not emotional instability, but spiritual sensitivity. You are more aware of the atmosphere. You can feel when something is misaligned. You recognize when situations are being forced rather than divinely led. This depth of perception is not a burden, it is an assignment, and every assignment carries responsibility. Responsibility at this level requires strength, not loud, aggressive strength, but quiet endurance. It demands discipline. The ability to choose restraint when reacting would be easier. It demands boundaries, the wisdom to discern what you are called to carry and what you must decline. Without boundaries, weight becomes crushing. With boundaries, weight becomes authority. Boundaries transform pressure into stewardship. Many avoid this elevation because it requires ownership. Here, you cannot blame others for your decisions. You cannot hide behind confusion. You cannot delay accountability or excuse your responses. You are responsible for how you react, what you tolerate, and what you allow to influence you. Every choice carries significance. Small compromises create large consequences. Small disciplines create long-term stability. You must choose deliberately, consistently, and consciously. That level of responsibility intimidates those who prefer comfort over growth. When they sense this weight approaching, they retreat. They numb themselves. They distract themselves. They choose noise instead of awareness. But you remained. You accepted the responsibility. You allowed God to sharpen your perception instead of dulling it for relief. The weight is never assigned randomly. God entrusts weight to those who can carry it without misusing it. The pressure you feel is evidence of trust. You are being trained to hold influence without losing humility, insight without developing pride, and responsibility without becoming fearful. Do not diminish what you carry simply because others cannot understand it. You are not required to explain this level to everyone. Many are still avoiding the weight you are learning to manage. You are not overwhelmed. You are being strengthened. And your continued stability confirms that God placed you here intentionally. Where you are standing now, image cannot sustain you and performance cannot protect you. Appearance holds no authority at this level. Reputation alone cannot carry you forward. Charisma cannot anchor you. Only integrity has real weight here. Who you are in private matters far more than what you display in public. God has intentionally removed the pressure to impress so He can establish something unshakable within you. He has reduced the audience. He has quieted the noise. He has removed the constant expectation to perform, not to diminish you, but to free you. He is teaching you to live truthfully rather than impressively, quietly rather than loudly, deeply rather than visibly. Substance is replacing show. Here, pretending becomes impossible. Masks feel heavy. Performances grow exhausting. Any misalignment between your inner life and your outward behavior becomes evident quickly. This level requires alignment. Your private convictions must match your public walk. Your beliefs must match your decisions. Your faith must be practiced, not merely displayed. God is more concerned with how you live than how you appear. He is refining your motives, not just your actions. He is asking difficult questions. Why do you pursue what you pursue? Who are you when obedience costs you something? What governs your choices when no one sees and nothing is rewarded? Few survive comfortably here because image-based living collapses under this kind of weight. It is easier to return to environments where appearance is sufficient and depth is optional. It is easier to be admired than aligned, easier to perform than to be transformed. That is why many retreat when integrity becomes the requirement. But you did not retreat. You allowed God to search your heart instead of defending your image. You accepted correction instead of protecting appearances. You permitted Him to dismantle what looked impressive outwardly, but was misaligned inwardly. You chose truth over comfort, alignment over approval, obedience over applause. Integrity at this elevation means consistency when recognition is absent. It means choosing what is right, even when compromise would be simpler and quieter. It means obeying even when obedience slows your progress. Integrity is not perfection. It is honesty before God and a willingness to adjust when He corrects you. God is not rushing your development. He is rooting for you. He is establishing foundations capable of sustaining influence, responsibility, and trust. What is being built in this season is meant to endure, and what endures cannot be constructed on image. It must be built on integrity. Understand this clearly. Integrity is not restrictive. It is protective. It guards your peace. It preserves your clarity. It sustains your authority. Image may impress people temporarily, but integrity carries divine purpose. Image fades. Integrity compounds over time. You are standing where few survive comfortably because this level demands integrity over image. Image attracts attention, but integrity carries assignment. Only those willing to live aligned, whether seen or unseen, celebrated or ignored, remain steady here. And you are still standing. And it is important that you understand this without confusion or disappointment. This position was never created to make you comfortable. It was created to make you capable. It was never designed around emotional ease or personal convenience. It was designed around preparation. This season is shaping you for impact, influence, and faithful stewardship, realities that demand strength, discipline, and spiritual depth. Influence carries weight. It has consequences. It affects people beyond what you can immediately see. Because of that, God does not rush the process of preparing you for it. Influence magnifies whatever already exists within a person. If discipline is weak, influence exposes the weakness. If discernment is shallow, influence distorts judgment. If humility is absent, influence corrupts character. So, before God expands your reach, He fortifies your core. What you are learning right now is not random, it is intentional and necessary. Restraint is teaching you self-mastery, how to pause instead of reacting, how to respond instead of retaliating. Patience is teaching you divine timing, how to wait without losing faith, how to trust God's pace instead of forcing outcomes. Discernment is sharpening your accuracy, helping you see beneath appearances, recognize alignment, and choose wisely. Humility is building sustainability, enabling you to carry responsibility without becoming rigid, prideful, or disconnected. These lessons are not optional extras, they are requirements for where you are going. The next level will demand them daily. Without them, influence would drain you instead of empowering you. This season is a training ground, not a resting ground. Training is uncomfortable by design. It stretches muscles you did not know you possessed. It exposes weaknesses so they can be strengthened. It requires repetition, focus, and consistency. Comfort would interrupt this strengthening. Ease would soften the very areas God is intentionally building. If you became too comfortable now, you would lose the alertness this level demands. Comfort dulls awareness. Ease weakens discipline. Familiarity blurs discernment. So God keeps you attentive, anchored, and awake, not to exhaust you, but to prepare you. Even the rest feels different now. It is no longer an escape from responsibility. It is recovery for responsibility. You are learning how to pause without quitting, how to slow down without retreating, how to rest without abandoning your assignment. That balance is critical because influence requires longevity. It requires endurance, not burnout. You are also discovering that influence is not about visibility. It is about responsibility. God is not eager to display you publicly. He is committed to shaping you privately. Public influence without private preparation collapses under pressure. But influence built upon discipline, humility, and discernment endures. What feels demanding now is purposeful. God is not withholding comfort out of cruelty. He is prioritizing your capacity over your convenience. What He is sharpening now will protect you later. What He is strengthening now will sustain you when responsibility increases. Remain anchored. Remain teachable. Remain alert. Do not interpret the absence of comfort as the absence of God. He is closer than you perceive, working deliberately, carefully, intentionally. You are not being deprived. You are being prepared. This shaping process is evidence that God trusts you with influence many are not ready to carry. You are standing where few survive comfortably because this space is narrow by design. It is not spacious or flexible. It does not permit excess distractions or unnecessary attachments. Its narrowness is intentional. It removes what is optional, so what is essential can remain. This is not a restriction. It is refinement at its highest expression. At this elevation, focus is not optional. It is required. Emotional clutter cannot be carried here. Competing priorities cannot be entertained. Divided attention weakens movement. Every step must be deliberate. Every choice must be intentional. This place demands mental clarity, spiritual discipline, and precision in action. Many turn back, not because they are rejected, but because they are unwilling to release what this level will not permit. Wide paths attract crowds because they allow comfort, compromise, and excess. Narrow paths remain quiet because they require surrender. Accept that not everyone will understand your journey. Understanding often comes only after purpose is fulfilled and outcomes become visible. Comfort is not the reward here. Clarity is. In this space, clarity sharpens. God removes what is unnecessary, not to deprive you, but to empower you. He reduces noise so your discernment becomes precise. He limits access so your focus strengthens. He simplifies your surroundings so your direction becomes unmistakable. What feels like loss is alignment forming. You may notice your circle shrinking, your schedule quieting, your priorities narrowing. This is not isolation. It is concentration. It is intentional positioning. It is preparation for influence that requires integrity, endurance, and unwavering clarity. God is teaching you to move with precision instead of pressure. He is training you to value accuracy over urgency, to act from clarity rather than anxiety. You are learning to choose depth over breadth, substance over appearance, intention over expansion. This level does not reward hurried movement, it rewards aligned movement. God trusts you with this position because narrow places demand maturity. They require restraint when reacting would be easier. They require the courage to walk alone without developing resentment. They require confidence that does not depend on applause or constant reassurance. You cannot survive here if you are driven by validation. You remain here because your strength is being rooted internally. Understand this clearly. God would not position you in this space if you were incapable of carrying what it is designed to produce. This placement is not accidental. It is confirmation. Confirmation that you have outgrown wide paths where distraction was normal and excess was tolerated. Confirmation that you are ready to carry responsibility without being pulled in multiple directions. Confirmation that your spirit can endure refinement without losing focus or direction. Chosen one, do not resist the narrowness. Do not crave the crowd simply because it feels familiar. Do not confuse simplicity with limitations. The narrow place is where clarity is born. It is where strength is purified. It is where purpose becomes steady rather than scattered. Few survive comfortably here because few are willing to exchange comfort for clarity, distraction for discipline, and excess for alignment. But those who remain emerge focused, grounded, and prepared for what comes next. Stay aligned even when it feels quiet. Stay disciplined even when no one notices. Stay faithful even when outcomes are delayed. This narrow space is not restricting you. It is shaping you for the future God has already prepared. Chosen one, pause and truly recognize where you are standing. This place is not easy, and it was never intended to be. It is demanding, it is quiet, it is narrow. It is often misunderstood by those who prefer broader paths, yet it is deeply purposeful. Few survive comfortably here because few are willing to release comfort, distraction, and excess in exchange for clarity, discipline, and spiritual alignment. If your journey feels heavier than others, it is because you are carrying responsibility many avoid. If your path feels lonelier, it is because it requires focus that crowds cannot sustain. If your life feels simplified, it is not because you are being reduced. It is because you are being refined. You are standing where few survive comfortably, not because you are excluded from ease, but because you are entrusted with preparation. And the fact that you are still standing confirms that you were built for this narrow, purposeful, and powerful ground.